what Silke gave us as our talking points. It's pretty much like I said. But basically, here is where the journey started. I have been a learning consultant all my life, and over the past few years, I transitioned into being more of a change organization consultant. And so I did a lot of change management projects. I worked for one of the big four consultants. So I worked with really large organizations leading large transformation projects. Now, most of these change projects happened in the context of a business or a technology change, but we sold change management as a component of these projects. And we did a lot of these projects. I mean, don't get me wrong, over the last few years, I did a ton of these projects. And then I started noticing that we came in, we did these projects, and we went away as consultants. But when I look back at these organizations, we left a trail of destruction. People basically quit. I mean, people who had been in the organization for 30 years quit immediately after our project was done. People, they had mental breakdowns, they had emotional duress, they had a lot of pain, right? And I also noticed that with my own colleagues, people who worked with me, essentially change management people, they did that for 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, and then they kind of burnt out. They went away to do their own things, they opened their own practices, and basically no one was in the zone anymore. Right? Then I started reading about it, and I said, depending on who you ask, anywhere between 60 to 80% of all change management projects fail, and that doesn't seem right. No business process that has a failure rate of 70% is considered a good design process. It's considered something that should even exist, right? But somehow change management seems to be getting away with this, and the question is why, right? Is it not that we know better? Is it not that we can do better? Is it because change management is supposedly an intangible that we don't know how to work better? So I started with a bunch of these questions. The first one that I said is, how do I make change management more human? How do we look at a model? How do we look at an approach that doesn't leave behind this trail of destruction wherever we go by? Right? And one of the things that I focused about was something called change fatigue. When we started change management models 30, 40 years ago, basically change happened over a 40-year, 50-year career. You would be lucky if you went through change twice, right? Because you would practically start doing the same thing and go gradually for the next 30, 40 years. You retire, you're done with your career, all of that is nice and fine. But in today's day and age, something or the other is bound to change every 2 years, every 4 years, every 6 years, depending on what industry you're in. I stayed in Deloitte for about 7 years. I had 4 CEOs with 4 different go-to-market approaches. By the time I finally figured out CEO 1's go-to-market approach, it was time for them to move on. Right? So I practically, by the time the 4th CEO came, I said, look, I'm not even going to listen to you. And that cynicism is actually very dangerous, because what it means is, over a period of, let's say, 10 years or 12 years of a career, you've essentially gone through enough change to last you for a lifetime, and you have gotten a state of change cynicism and a change fatigue, which essentially means after that you're going to be more and more resistant to change. Which means as I get to more senior leadership, I'm going to have a bunch of people who want to change because it's good for their career, but who don't have the capacity to change because, well, they have the fatigue. So, second part I started talking about is, how do I differentiate between change, transition, and transformation? So, one of the ways that I kind of looked at it is, you have ants in a row, right? And you put a piece of wood on it, and they can't get around it, they can't get over it, they go around it, right? But the moment I take the wood away, they start going back in the same straight line, right? So that, fundamentally to me is the difference between change and transformation, right? It is basically me going to the gym. As long as she motivates me and says go go go, I'm probably going to go. But the day she forgets, I'm going to say I'm done. So I've changed during the process when I go to the gym, but I've not transformed into a gym going person. So inherently change works pretty much the same way. So we kind of force you to adopt a particular process, but the moment you go away, the change team goes away, people go back to old habits, and that is not a good idea. So transformation is a better idea for us to kind of explore rather than change per se. So I started looking at what has already been done, where do they fall short, how do we do less harm, what other concepts can we leverage. And this is very important. So I said, in the field of psychology, in the field of psychiatry, for example, there's a lot of work that has been done on how do I enable individuals to transform. How do I provide individuals with the tool sets that they can themselves deal with the change that happens in their life, that they can themselves be transformation ready. But can I borrow from some of those to build into an organizational or a systemic concept where the system itself is transformation ready, or as I like to call it, transformation enabled. And that is the part that I kind of explored a little bit. How do you counter transformation enablement, and again, where do those models fall short? The big question that I obviously started with is, how is this not already happened? How have we gone 40 years with change management and not had this question thought about? So basically I spent the entire 6 months that I thought about this, that says, I can't be the only person who's thinking about this. This should have already been solved, and I just haven't read the right research, read the right books, met the right people, or whatever those frameworks was. And interestingly enough, I didn't find research to actually back it up. So I still don't know the question of why is this a new idea, why it is not already solved, right? But this is something that I had to deal with every single day that I wrote this paper, because I felt almost like an imposter who hasn't figured out the answer yet on this. So basically, the idea is to go from change management to transformation enablement. So to start with, what today is what our business processes are. William Bridges has done a lot of work on transition management. This has been my bedrock, so to speak, to move into transformation enablement. To those of you who don't recognize it, that's the flying spaghetti monster. And FSM is a personal favorite of mine. So basically the question is, how in the name of all holy FSM do we do transformation enablement? Right? And being at INSEAD, and this is one of the triggers, is how can change be a force of good? How do I not harm people as I do change management projects? Right? So this is the core idea around which the entire thesis. Actually, let me take it a step back. Research has been based, because what I've essentially done through my paper is research what has been existing, used my lenses to kind of think about what can be done, and to be very frank, the thesis is a little open-ended, because I've kind of left it open with a bunch of questions, because we need to jump in. Fair enough. So the red line, this is where we kind of go with. We start with change management model, transition from William Bridges, negative capability from John Keats, behavioral economics, assumptive cultures by Wilfred Bjorn, and organizational of Edward Sheen. The Bridges model, this is very important. The Bridges model essentially says there's something, instead of looking at change as start, begin, end, start, middle, end, the Bridges essentially says it's the opposite. You have to finish what is existing then there is a neutral zone, and then there is a new beginning. So this is a very interesting concept. And he applies this mostly for individuals. In the more recent years, they have started using it for organizations. But where this actually fails is it's theoretically excellent, but there is no playbook, which means I can't apply it consistently within other organizations. Keats and the idea of negative capability, this is something that has fascinated me since I discovered this. Keats essentially describes that an ability where you are comfortable with not knowing. You're comfortable with not being in control. And he says that is where innovation actually comes from. That is where great art comes from. That is where greatness comes from. Right? But management essentially says, how do I manage everything? How do I make sure I'm in control of everything? But Keats' negative capability essentially says you don't need to be in control of everything for you to control the outcome. Right? So it's a bit of a black box presentation. Okay. I'm just going to quickly jump through. The one idea that I want to kind of talk about in Sheen is organizations only learn from duress, and good leaders account for pain. This is very important as a concept because it ties back to Bridges' idea of the neutral zone. It ties back to Keats' idea of negative capability. It essentially says organizations should exist in this thesis that says you are always in a state to transformation. You are always in an ability to learn. You are always in an ability to grow. So obviously, from the limitations of the thesis, the research is great, but I don't have an answer of how this is done. And basically, my ideology is to go with this approach, where it's a deconstruction, activation, enablement, and sustenance model. Obviously, the model itself isn't very innovative by itself, but I believe future research will allow us to get into a playbook more of being able to build this out and actually take it into some form of a methodology. And that is my rather fast presentation. Sorry, I'm a couple of minutes late, but yes.
Abhi, can you elaborate a bit on your research method and how you used night lenses?
So my methodology was mostly literature research. So I went through all of these people. They figured out their life works and used the lenses to find where they were possibly failing. So where I did my research is each of these literature has been explored, and then I speak about where it potentially fails, and then connecting each of these very different pieces of research to each other. So, for example, Sheen, for example, he spent a lot of time with organizations in his initial 35 years of his career, and towards the end of his career, he started actually talking about negative capability. Right, so there is a connecting line between all of these research methods, so to speak. But yeah. Yes.
I want to share with you, though it's difficult because it's in French, but I have a friend who wrote a book, and the title of the book is Changement sans fin, changing without an end. But there's a play on words in the French terminology of without fin, because it also means without finality.
Yeah.
You know, and so both are linked. You know, it's endless and it's without finality, and that's he's describing the things that's what you described in organizations. That's the first thought I had, because it's nice in the French wording, and the second is that there's so much resonance between you, the millennials, Felicia. I'm thinking about might change this. I think that we're making links.
Yeah,
nice.
Absolutely.
What links do you see?
Well, see, I mean, it hits the subject of millennials too, of learning. I mean, of being on the constant move. It hits also the subject of purpose, when there's purpose and when there's no purpose. So it is this transformational change that I was describing. That's the links I'm making, you know.
Yes.
Abhi, I was wondering if during your thesis work, have you reflected on your own personal story and the fields of distraction possibly that you may have left behind? Is this somehow playing a part of the role, or maybe looking for a closure on those any thoughts?
Absolutely, without a doubt. So I have actually kept in touch with a lot of people who I worked with over the years, and one of the most people who were the most affected actually quit his job to come work for me in my current role. So there's definitely several themes there, but you're right. So to me, it was almost an atonement for some of the work that I've done, because I believe if I haven't at least spent time understanding what we did wrong, then it is probably not a good place for me to be. But yeah, you're right, 100%. Yes.
So this idea of accountants of pain, right? That's kind of the role of the leader, I assume, versus custodians of hope.
Mm-hmm.
Did you reflect on this? In
Yes.
anything? Yeah.
So there is the part when you say account for pain,
Yeah.
it is about how you plan for a particular process. The custodian of hope is how you communicate your change process. If as a leader you're not willing to acknowledge that your people are going to go through pain, then you're somehow failing as a leader, right? And this is what Sheen actually talks about. He says, if I do a project plan for change and essentially I don't acknowledge the fact that my people are going through pain, and in that pain is when they learn, then your plan is essentially bound to fail. So that is his point. So custodian of hope is the communicative part. The plan for change, plan for pain is essentially the empirical planning part of it. Yes. Yes.
I'm listening to you. I was, of course, reflecting to my practice also of consultant and organization development. And I'm wondering, and it's a very honest question, humbly, if in this approach of how we lead the change, it seems like there is a paradox. There is so much complexity. Why was it not solved until now? You come with this question. And I'm wondering whether we're not trying to find a solution on the same level. Because what I'm perceiving is that the assumption that there is someone who knows what change needs to be, and then all we need to figure out and how to implement it.
Right.
And I'm wondering if there is not another paradigm where it can be grown through and more enabling a space for the change to appear. But
You're absolutely right.
Do you see what I'm trying
Yeah.
to say?
In fact,
Can you say it better?
in fact, that is exactly what I go with. I'm saying, so I'm saying as change practitioners, it is not about coming into an organization and getting out. It is not about a single phase engagement. It is essentially like you would do with therapy, like you would do with personal enablement, is you work with over them with a period of time to enable the organization to become self-serving in changing culture. So I actually explore behavioral economics. I explore several concepts to talk about how do I make an organization itself ready. And then I'm saying change management people should not do change at all.
That's my point.
They should not do change. Correct. So basically I'm saying work with an organization, enable the organization does change. You are not God, you're not going to play God here and say, I am the one who is going to build change. I'm essentially saying, here is the space that I've created, you go ahead and figure out how you are going to change. So that is the enablement part of it.
And I'm wondering if we can push this question even further, that whether it is up to leaders
Yeah,
and not maybe the teams that are on the ground
absolutely.
to initiate whatever direction is needed. So how you sense that and how you enable that happening. So that's, thank you.
I think this was, and Walden, thank you for that, because I was sort of thinking the same thing. This is an excellent example of insider research, with an insider who came in with a particular fundamental question, and of course a mindset, a kind of a bias of experience. And this thesis has been a beautiful example of someone who's gone right back to the core of his own question, and you've given yourself the space to really reflect on what this all means. And I think the beauty of what you've done is that we can see almost like you're an archetype of a change consultant, and we can see the super tanker of like, not want to mix metaphors, but let's say the super tanker, we can see the super tanker shifting in a different direction in the work that you've done. And I was gripped by your story of the consultants. Everyone is burned out. Everyone has change fatigue. Everyone is anxious. That's so important. And I think what we see here is someone now you are ready to make a big difference, to teach, to be a kind of a consultant who says, I'm strong enough now to hold that negative space in the organizations when I go in. So that's what struck me as I was listening to you. So that was well done. Thank you for that. And obviously that everyone can relate to, and it engenders this kind of a deep conversation, which is a sign that you've really touched people. You really understand what you're doing. Yeah.
Thank you.
So thank you very much for that. So I think you can have a seat, but I think we're